Welcome to WholeCEO with Lisa G. I'm the best-selling author of The Boss Weight Loss. I'm bringing you the top tips to be unstoppable. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to actually pull up a chair with today's top experts in mindset, weight loss, business, and more. Learn our top tips so that you can have more energy, be fit and resilient, feel unstoppable, unshakable, and unbreakable. He unlocks empowerment through greater awareness, blending science, spiritual teachings, and contemplative practices to lift the veil on perspectives that seem helpful but keep us stuck. He's a corporate trainer, speaker, coach, writing a book on transformation. Decades of analytical rigor are brought to decoding the body-mind. His diverse experience and expertise from attachment theory to epigenetics provides the keys to greater happiness and success. His mind-body approach synergizes scientific insights, near feedback, and ancient wisdom for true transformation. Welcome to the podcast, Mitch Swergold.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. It's great to be here.
Oh, so great to have you. I know that you and I are both really into the topic of unstoppable. I started this podcast 3 years ago, wanted to help people be unstoppable during the pandemic, and it's still going on. So what does it mean to you to be unstoppable?
Wow, what a great question. And I know you've been asking this for a long time. I was thinking about it, and I think I'm going to answer a little differently, maybe from some others. For me, I don't think about being unstoppable.
Okay.
Because, as we know, where attention goes, energy flows. And so if we're focused on what we're resisting, which is being stopped,
right?
What we resist persists.
Exactly.
So instead, I'm focused on what I want to accomplish, who I want to be in the world, how I want to be in the world, and what flows from that, I think, is very powerful. And it enables us to continue on a path of growth and well-being. It incorporates a flexible mindset instead of the fixed one that is perhaps sometimes hyper-focused and doesn't allow us to see other possibilities. And so for me, it's really all about living from the place of who I am, what I stand for. What is that? What is that in the world? What do I bring to the world?
Well, there's so much to unpack there. I love all the things that you stand for, because basically you focus on what you want so that expands rather than being stopped and stuck. And also how you show up is how you lead the way for other people. Is that right?
I think that's a really good way of expressing it. And one of the things is that I teach people is not to be hyper focused on the goal, because when we are, there's a grasping there, there's a clinging. And that actually energetically pushes it away. And it also makes it hard. I know one of the questions you're going to ask about is happiness. And so when we're not, whatever there is, when we're not there yet, there might not be a there, but anyway, when we're on this journey, we want to be focused on what we're doing right now, in this present moment, to advance ourselves and well-being and health and happiness for others and for the planet. And if we focus too much on the goal, that's where unhappiness comes in, because then we're living in the future instead of living in this present moment.
Well, I can definitely relate. And there's so many people that I know, we're always like striving for the next thing and the next thing. And it's really important to take stock, what you've already done, where you're already at, be happy now, and have a growth mindset. I think those are great things. And I also wanted to ask you more about how we can be happy while we're also striving for more, because we all want things, but how can we just be happy in the present moment now?
There's so much work in our world to be done. We could all be happy right in this present moment if we were all being conscious. And any one of us can be happy just by being present. being conscious. So I don't think that happiness has to be such a difficult hurdle. It's our clinging and attachment, as I was saying before, to things in the future. So in terms of striving, I think that it's great to want to improve ourselves, to be better, to be better at what we're doing, and to do new and different things. And I think that that newness also is really good for the mind. It actually helps with happiness a lot because we're creating. And when we're in that creative process, we're in the process of fulfilling our potential.
Yeah. Well, being conscious, it sounds easy, but there's always that 800-pound gorilla ego mind in the back trying to keep you stuck in fear and old programming. And I was listening to a podcast the other day with Ed Millett. He was talking to the guy who wrote on F Yourself, I'll Say Keep This Clean. And it was all about how most of our programming from the past controls our behavior in the present. So how can we develop an awareness that we're running an old pattern like that and not being present and not being conscious and just ruled by this old, like how your parents used to be?
I love this question. Because it really takes me into a lot of the stuff that I do with people and help them to understand how they're running unconscious patterns and operating largely unconsciously. So even in this conversation, I'm speaking right now, and I'm not like thinking about every word I'm saying, it just comes, right? That's a pattern. And we need to be running patterns in order to survive. Like we learn how to walk, we learn how to talk, we learn how to do all the different things in life, and we don't have to think about it as we're doing it, because if we did, we wouldn't get anything done. And for that matter, there are trillions and trillions and trillions of processes going on in all of our cells at every moment of every day. And so if I take a step back, what I teach people is to understand who they are from an evolutionary standpoint, as well as from a spiritual standpoint. From an evolutionary standpoint, there's something called the cell danger response. So if you take an amoeba, a single-celled organism, you put it in a petri dish and you poke it with a microscopic prod, you know what it does? The same thing you would if somebody poked you. It contracts.
Right.
And then after a while, it comes back. But if you poke it enough times or hard enough, it remains contracted, just like you or I would. And so what happens is we develop these defensive patterns that are there for a good reason, which is survival, which is the number one objective of all living beings. It's to make it to tomorrow. It's not to eat, not to drink, not anything, but to make it to tomorrow. And so, excuse me. So what we need to do is we need to recognize that, okay, I'm running all these patterns and I intellectually understand that I haven't been seeing them for my whole life. So once I wake up to that reality, then through things like meditation, we can sit in silence. And this is why I really advocate for people sitting in silence and not using apps and not listening, not doing guided and so on. Although those are fine, they're not going to get the same results. And the reason is because in that silence, you begin to start to see the patterns.
Oh, wow.
When you can start to see the patterns that you're running, that's when you can create some space between you, or let's say a stimulus, and your response. So Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, Holocaust survivor,
right, I love
said that between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space lies our opportunity to choose. And in that choice lies our freedom. And so what I will add to that is that the reason we can make a choice is because once we open up the space, as opposed to instantaneous reaction, right? Like anger is an instantaneous reaction.
Yeah.
But if we can learn how to be with discomfort, that's another skill that we learn in meditation.
Yes.
And we can allow things to slow down, the space opens up. And then instead of being driven by an unconscious pattern that's running in our body, we're actually able to choose an empowered response. We're empowered, putting the power back in you. And so you get to choose instead of the past choosing. Instead of your great, 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 great grandmother choosing for you, you're choosing.
Well, it comes to breathing too. I mean, for me, I like guided meditations because it quiets my monkey mind down, and then I focus on what I'm grateful for, focus on what I want to accomplish. And that's a good combination for me, but we're all so different. But it's so many things that we do or drive somewhere and we're like, we just got there, or having a conversation and it's not going well, when we're unconscious so much of the day. If we truly want to be unstoppable, besides meditation, what tools do you have for my audience here on being unstoppable when we're stopped by being effed by our past?
Well, I have a lot of them. First of all, I think you're absolutely right. So the breath is a key element of any good meditation practice, and it's the bridge between the body and mind. So all this stuff, this trauma, this past, this patterning is stuck in the body, actually. And
Yes.
it comes up and we react in a particular way. And then actually the mind provides an explanation for why we reacted that way. Instead of, we tend to think it's because Joe did X that I'm angry, but actually it's a pattern that we're running and we're just providing an explanation that it was Joe.
Right.
It's really the pattern inside of me that I need to identify. So breathing into the belly helps us to remain calm and to open up that space that we practiced during meditation. But there are a lot of other tools that we can use. And I think that overall health and wellness is important. Things like neurofeedback, where I work with Doc Royer, who's one of the most preeminent neuropsychologists in the country. And I offer, and by the way, he's got NFL Super Bowl champions and NBA and PGA stars and Tony Robbins and all kinds of other really high performers as his clients. And I work with him and I offer his neurofeedback system, which is a patented proprietary system. And so we can do an assessment, which gives us a quantitative sense as to where people are. And then we're able to provide training to help them to develop different parts of the brain to bring calm to the system, to repattern the system, the nervous system, right, and the brain. And so we do this on the left, top, and center, and right side of the brain. So there's that. Plant medicine can be enormously helpful, obviously within the limits of the law in places where that's legal. And understanding how everything is energy. So for me, as also a somatic practitioner now, somatic means body-based, I help people to discharge trauma, which is really just stuck energy. It's one way of thinking about it, from the body. And in my own story, I had an 18-year brutally painful hip injury that I thought was because of bike racing back when I was younger. And it turned out that doing energy work, I realized that actually this was all about the trauma of when my father left when I was a kid.
Wow.
And after 18 years, in one day, it got, I'm going to pick a number, I don't know what the exact number is, but let's say 20% better. And then doing spiritual work and working with another somatic healer over the next 3 days, so 4 days total, my hip got 80% better. And then in the last year and change since then, it's gotten to like 95%. So it's like dramatic. I mean, like there were years where I couldn't, not forget about I couldn't ride the bike for 15 years, which is like my joy in life.
Yes.
Could not ride a bike. And even after the 15 years, I was very limited in how much I could ride. Now I can ride all I want. I ride with guys 20 and 30 years younger than me, and we're out there hammering for 50, 60, 70, 80 miles. And I am in better health today at 58 than I've ever been in my entire life, including infancy.
That's amazing.
And I think that is all, thank you. I think that is all due to having done a tremendous amount of energy work, a tremendous amount of meditation, a tremendous amount of introspection, a tremendous amount of all of these practices that we've talked about. I think yoga is super helpful as well. Discharging trauma from the body through somatic work, which I can offer to people. Neurofeedback, which helps focus and reduces symptoms of all kinds of challenging things, because you are a nervous system. You're mobilized like the amoeba. You're just a lot of amoeba that are all put together, trillions of them, into a nervous system that's surrounded by sensory systems, supported by a skeleton, mobilized by muscle, and you think you're you. But actually, you're just this nervous system. And what's motivating the whole thing, or what is behind the whole thing, not motivating it, is consciousness, which is who you really are. Now, that gets more into spiritual teachings, but quantum physics has actually proven this to be true. And so right now, there are people who are bridging the distinctions between our perception of living in a physical world and actually who we really, who we really are as consciousness inhabiting this physical body temporarily, which goes more, again, into spiritual teachings, but physics is proving this to be true. And that part's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying someone should jump into the deep end of the pool with it. Right. But with these practices, we can come to actually feel and experience that. And I think that the more people do this, the more they realize who they really are, which actually is love and connection and oneness, the better they are at serving others, which should be the focus of our work, right? If we're focused on, I want the yacht, we're always going to be in pain. But if we're focused on being of service to others, and then the yacht happens to come because we did a good job, okay, great. But that is a desire, and desire from an energetic standpoint vibrates at a very, very, very low and painful level. Whereas love and service and connection generates at a very, very, very high frequency, which makes us feel wonderful. And so we want to be moving up through the levels of vibration to higher levels of consciousness so that we're happier more of the time by being connected and in service to others. And that's how we make the world a better place. But the focus is actually, instead of going, I traveled the world for a long time. And when I left Wall Street, I went to live in Europe. And then from there, as my base, I traveled all over, and I'd already done a tremendous amount of travel. But my most important travels, although those were so wonderful, the external travels were wonderful, the inner travels through my own mind, through my own awareness, through my own heart, peeling back the layers of my heart and opening and softening and becoming kinder and more connected and more loving. That's what's really life-changing. And so I serve as a guide to help people to do what I've done. And all I'm doing is, I'm not, let's say I'm not telling them what to do, rather I'm asking them questions that help them to realize for themselves, because we don't learn by people telling us things. We learn by experiencing for ourselves.
That is so true. I'm a very experiential learner, and it just shows how you show up energetically so that other people can feel the vibe and show up that way. My last question is two things, really. When we talk about the trigger and response, is there a trick, any other trick that you can do in that gap where you can own that maybe this is this real? Is this really that like urgent or important, or is this coming from my past? Or is there any way to know that you just need to take a breath first or something like that before?
I think it's a great question. It's a great question. You're a very good interviewer, I have to say.
Thank you.
I always enjoy our conversations, Lisa. You ask great questions. So I think that the key is to create a habit of noticing our feelings and our sensations, because what most of us have done, myself included, and I remember sitting with a coach once, and she asked me, where do you feel that in your body? And my response is, what are you talking about? I don't feel anything. And I didn't feel anything. And many men have this issue where we are raised to not feel.
Right.
We are raised to push it all down, not feel, be very, very, very intellectual, left brain about everything. And we lose our connection, which is the right brain. And it's not just connection with others, it's connection with self. And so I think that for me, I'll tell you briefly, the story is that I actually, also with the same coach, something came up for me that was very, very difficult material that my mind didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
And I remember it was like located out here somewhere, and I could kind of get it, but the moment I would try to focus on it, the mind would just shut it down. It's fascinating to see your own mind doing that. And you're like, wait, I want to know what that is. And the mind's like, no, it's too difficult.
Resistance.
And it shuts it down. And so I sat and I meditated on it for several days, and it finally was able to arise. So part of meditation, I think I mentioned before, is learning to be with discomfort. And when we learn to be with that discomfort, we tend to learn that the discomfort, once it's actually there, once we actually are present with it, it fades away. Like the feeling of discomfort, the feeling of fear, the feeling of, ooh, that doesn't feel good in my body. Once we start noticing how that works, we can be with the content and not be sucked in by the feeling that's uncomfortable, and the feeling fades. And now we can be with the content.
Wow.
And that's another thing, that plants are really helpful for accelerating that. But the answer to your question then with that as context is, if we're in a situation that we find triggering, right? What's happening is there's something in the body, there's a pattern, and it's coming up and it doesn't feel good. So we try to shut it down immediately. And part of that is external blame for whatever it is, right? So we might yell at someone, or we might be angry at someone, or we might put ourselves in victim mode that they're wrong, bad, or whatever, or they're doing something to us. And instead, to just learn to be with that discomfort. And the way that we do that is we breathe. We breathe into the belly. You said it earlier. It really is the key. I think it's one of the most, if not the most important skills, kind of important for survival too, like we kind of need oxygen. But what it is oxygen is very healing, and it's got life force energy as well. And so we need to just breathe, and breathe into the belly, the lower part of the or the lungs, where the diaphragm expands, and we're sitting up straight. We breathe and we pause. And we don't need to react. We don't need to say anything. We just sit and we be with it. And of course, that's more difficult if we're in a situation with someone else. So practice where it's easier. Like for me, as the hedge fund manager running around New York City who was always late, I would get angry at red lights, which is crazy, right?
Crazy. Right, I've seen that.
Yeah, and it's an inanimate object. So whose fault is it, the red light or me for not leaving early enough?
It's the red light, obviously.
The red light, of course, right? Exactly. So being that I can recognize that that's my fault. I didn't leave early enough, but I noticed that it's triggering to me. I'm like, come on, like now. So sitting with that in a situation where I'm not going to get anything back from the red light. There's no interaction there. If you can figure out what's your red light in life, where you have something that you can work with that's relatively easy because there's no talking back involved.
Yeah, just sitting at.
And there's only one person you can look to, right?
Right.
Yeah. I
I
think
love
that's so noticing. So it's breathe into the belly and even holding your breath for a moment, not long, but just for a moment, helps to calm the system immediately.
Yes.
And then noticing, what am I feeling? But the key is to be committed to this practice and absolutely not committed, not only not committed, but also aware that being right is a very good way for you to never heal.
I love it. Yeah, let go of the need to be right. Well, where can people find you? This is such powerful stuff. The world needs this kind of help right now.
Thanks. You can find me on my website. It's my name, mitchswergold.com, or if you can't remember my name, which is understandable, selfmasterygym.com. And I've got to upgrade my website. I need to add things like the neurofeedback and a lot of the biohacking stuff that I now offer and the somatic work. But this is all stuff that I offer, and I offer guidance and help and some practices and coaching and corporate training and public speaking. And as you mentioned, I'm writing a book or three. So one of these days I'll actually get them published. So
I can't wait to get a copy. Thanks for being a wonderful guest.
thank you so much for having me, Lisa. It was great to see you again.
Thanks for coming to Whole CEO with Lisa G. After over 20 years helping people lose weight and get fit, I'm so excited to announce that I found the missing link with my coaching. Message me if you want to learn how to look better, feel better, and go faster with a master. Lisa G at lisagfit.com.